Hello everyone. This story is about, what if Naruto and Temari had a political marriage after the failed Suna invasion? Desperate to keep their alliance with Konoha, the Suna council decides to offer Temari's hand in marriage to none other than Naruto, after realizing who he is. Hope you enjoy the story, and as always, please like, share and subscribe for more. Now let's start. Naruto stared nervously at the door to the Kazekage's manor. He was extremely hesitant to enter and face Temari, especially considering he'd ordered Asuma and Shikamaru to hold her there while he was supposedly fighting her brother. If things happened according to plan, Asuma should have briefed Temari and his team after he'd called in the mission success code of clear skies. But that probably wasn't going to save him from Temari's temper. From her place on the roof, Enko was watching Naruto with a great deal of amusement. She'd read the reports on him and she found it hilarious that the boy would unflinchingly face down much stronger shinobi but was terrified of his wife's temper. "It's a door, Gaki," she called from her perch. "You turn the knob, open it and enter. It's not that hard." Naruto rolled his eyes at the advice. "Gee, thanks Hibi-chan. You're always so helpful." When the masked woman just shrugged with an obvious air of amusement, Naruto sighed and decided he might as well get it over. Opening the door, he pasted a cheerful smile on his face that died when Temari honed in on him with an icy glare. He froze as she stalked across the room towards him, noting the overly controlled motions that screamed rage to him. He opened his mouth to say something, but was stopped when Temari's fist flashed forward and impacted on his ribs with a sickening snap that drove him to his knees. Struggling to regain his breath, he could only watch as Temari stood over him with a murderous glare. "How could you?" she growled. "He was your friend, my brother. How could you kill him?" Naruto flinched as her controlled tone gave way to a rage and pain-filled roar. Still having trouble breathing, Naruto weakly held a hand up towards her. "Wait," he managed to stammer out. "Didn't fight him, mission was to help him." Temari reached down and hooked Naruto by his jacket collar, yanking him up only to pin him against the wall, his feet dangling a few inches off the floor. "Explain," she commanded coldly. Taking a few moments to compose himself, Temari, jerking him off the floor, had done some agonizingly painful things to his ribs. Naruto met her gaze evenly. "I was sent on a mission. I was to help Gaara dispose of traitors in the advisory committee." Temari searched his face for any of his tells and concluded that he was telling her the truth, but in some ways, that actually made her even more angry. She released his collar and stepped back, planting her fists on her hips and used her height advantage to loom over her husband. "You didn't think I should know this?" she all but hissed at him. Naruto winced. Before she'd broken his ribs, this was the part he'd been most worried about. "The mission request from Suna explicitly said you were not to be told, Temari-chan. The only people who knew were Asuma-sensei, the ANBU escort squad, Gaara, Kankuro, Baki, and me." He'd probably have gotten a smaller reaction if he'd slapped her. Temari's face flushed and she gritted her teeth and reached behind her back for her fan, before she abruptly straightened and stormed from the room without another word. Naruto watched her go with a profound sense of unease and guilt. He knew firsthand how much it sucked to have secrets kept from you, but he needed to explain in a more private setting. Dragging himself to his feet, arm wrapped around his aching ribs, he stumbled across the room and collapsed on the couch next to Suma. Rolling his head towards the Jonin, he glared at the man. "Why the hell didn't you tell her I didn't kill Gaara?" he demanded testily. Asuma blew a streamer of smoke and pointed up. "I tried, she wasn't listening, and after she pulled this wind jutsu that slammed me into the ceiling, I decided that it was your problem." Naruto moved his gaze to where Asuma was pointing to see a large indent in the ceiling, and he winced in sympathy. To make that large of a dent in a brick ceiling, Temari must have used a lot of power. It served as a reminder that his wife was a damn powerful kunoichi even in her second trimester of pregnancy. He winced again as the pain from his ribs drove the point home. "Gotcha, that had to hurt, Asuma-sensei." Asuma chuckled around his ever-present cigarette. "Yeah, took me by surprise, but I'm gonna have to make her show me that jutsu. Not a lot of wind users in Konoha, and it was a pretty sweet little jutsu." Ino began to get irritated at the banter between the two. Naruto. What are you doing? Go talk to her. Naruto gave her an incredulous look. Ino-chan, in my experience, being punched does not mean a girl wants to talk. Ino looked aside and pressed the heel of her palm against her forehead with a muttered, forehead. Lowering her hand and turning back. She adopted a lecturing tone more suited to a not very bright child. Naruto, not all girls are like Sakura, you know. I'm telling you that if you don't go talk to her, you're gonna regret it. Naruto shifted forward towards Ino on the couch and winced at the pain it caused. And I'm telling you, I really don't think she wants to talk. Ino sniffed and crossed her arms. Fine, don't listen to the only girl in the room, but I warned you. Fine, you warned me, now can you do something about my ribs, please? Baka, Ino muttered before moving forward to scan his ribs with a basic medical jutsu. She whistled under her breath as she saw the extent of the damage from that one punch. She really did a number here, Naruto. There are hairline fractures on several ribs and 2 on your sternum. How the hell did you get up and walk over here? Naruto winced as she switched from scanning to healing. It beat even his fast recovery time, but having someone force your bones to heal at an accelerated rate was unpleasant. High pain tolerance. He grunted. He managed to distract himself when he noticed Ino had her tongue partially sticking out of the corner of her mouth as she concentrated. It was really cute, but wisely he refrained from saying anything. He'd already suffered enough under female hands today, as far as he was concerned. Ino sat back with a sigh and wiped sweat from her forehead with her arm. Done. She said tiredly. It's gonna be sore for a few days, but nothing I can do about that. Shifting around and stretching, Naruto flashed her a pleased grin. Thanks Ino-chan, that was awesome. You're getting really good at that medical stuff. Ino turned to hide the light blush his words caused and moved back to her earlier seat. Seeking a way to change the subject before anyone noticed her embarrassment, she decided to ask about the mission. Okay, so since Asuma-sensei wasn't able to brief us before, what actually happened? Her gossip instincts told her that this was probably a really good story, it was a pity it would probably be classified. Naruto quickly traded glances with Asuma and Kakashi, and both of the older shinobi just shrugged. Might as well be me, if I head into classified stuff I'm sure one of them will stop me. Sinking back in the comfortable couch, Naruto scratched his cheek and thought. Where to begin? He mused softly. Well, I'm sure Shikamaru told you we ran into Gaara during our last mission, right? After the two brat ran away, he paused and glared when Shikamaru had to stifle a laugh. As I was saying, after the mission ended, Gaara approached me and asked for my help. It had already been decided that he would become Kazekage, but he had concerns about the internal politics here in Sunagakure. Naruto. Kakashi said with a subtle undertone of warning. Naruto held his palm up towards Kakashi. Don't worry Inu-san, I'm just covering the basics. Getting a satisfied nod from Kakashi, he turned his attention back to Team 8 and was unsurprised to find them studying him carefully. So what troubled Gaara was that he didn't believe it would have been possible for even Orochimaru to have impersonated the previous Kazekage without inside help. Shikamaru had his hands in his thinking pose. I see. He said, slowly. He couldn't trust anyone in Sunagakure, but you, he knew where your loyalty would be. Naruto nodded at the lazy genius. Yeah, he said sheepishly. We spent some time working out the details, and then I took the mission to Bachan. Shikamaru nodded while Ino and Choji still looked confused. It was very clever of Gaara to seek Naruto's assistance, he told his team. Temari-san told me when we've chatted during our shogi games that Naruto is the only one that has ever defeated Gaara. Naruto comes to Sunagakure and he and Gaara stage a fight. The traitors on the committee would never be able to pass up possibly their only chance to eliminate Gaara, so they enlist Naruto's aid, claiming it to be the will of the committee. Being an allied shinobi, supposedly very angry with Gaara, Naruto would have little choice but to and a great deal of motive to fight Gaara. Ino's eyes lit up. But instead of fighting each other, they turn on the traitors, right? Naruto nodded. Yeah, that about sums it up. Shikamaru shook his head. This plan was insane. If something had gone wrong, it would have probably kicked off another shinobi war. He said tiredly. Naruto stuck his tongue out childishly. Well, it didn't go wrong, so there. I don't understand. Sorry, what was that, Choji? Naruto asked. Choji idly shoved a chip in his mouth and chewed as he thought. I'm not sure I understand some of this. Everyone knows you and Gaara are friends. Why would the committee assume you would fight Gaara? Naruto winced. This was going to skirt some personal issues. That Gaara and I are friends is common knowledge in Konoha, Naruto agreed. But here in Suna, not so much. There are many people here that don't believe Gaara is even capable of friendship. These same people would also believe the same thing about me because of the burden Gaara and I both carry. Naruto rubbed his temple in frustration over that sort of thought process. Every shinobi is a weapon for their village, he said after a small pause. That doesn't mean that's all we are, but it is the truth. Still, if every shinobi is a weapon, say a kunai, then those like Gaara and myself would be more like swords. Seeing he'd lost Choji and Ino, he backtracked a bit. The traitors were the sort to believe that Jinchuriki aren't human, so they never would have believed Gaara and I were friends. Seeing pity on Ino and Choji's faces, Naruto opened his mouth in irritation, only to be cut off by Shikamaru. The benefits of this plan are obvious, but the potential consequences are very troubling. I don't see Hokage-sama agreeing to this simply to further ties with Tsunagakure. What was worth the risk for Konoha, Naruto? Still in his thinking pose, he spoke again before Naruto could answer his last question. Yes, I know that you would have done this simply because Gaara is your friend. I can also understand that you feel obligated to help your brother-in-law, but that can't be the sole reason. Naruto sighed and nodded. Yes, you're right, there was something else. He conceded. You might not be aware of this, but part of the marriage contract stated that our firstborn male child would be required to marry a Tsunagakure kunoichi. From what Temari-chan told me, the advisory committee wanted to start a Namikaze clan branch here in Suna. He paused to make sure he still had control of his temper. No one had told him about that little detail until after he'd married Temari, and he wasn't sure which pissed him off more, the fact that his son's life was being dictated or that no one had felt he had the right to know, let alone say anything about it. Sure that he wasn't going to lose control of his temper, he continued the story. So, Gaara wasn't fond of the people who decided his fate before he was born, also deciding his nephew's fate, for some odd reason. Tomorrow, after he is sworn in as Kazekage, the first thing Gaara plans to do is strike that portion from the contract. I see. Shikamaru said as he relaxed from his thinking pose. The game you play, Naruto, it's almost better than shogi. Gotta look underneath the underneath. Naruto said with a crooked grin, silently thanking Shikamaru with his eyes for dropping the subject. Shikamaru might understand much of the hidden currents, but neither of his teammates would without a great deal of explaining. Somebody had played a long, subtle game with that little number, and Naruto really didn't feel like explaining how having a child allied with another village would prevent him from becoming Hokage but still strengthen village ties at the same time. As he'd told Kiba, he wasn't at the level he could keep up with the elder shinobi and kunoichi yet. I wonder if I should invite Shikamaru over to discuss these things with me and Temari-chan. If she ever decides to speak to me again, that is. Phew, I hate my life sometimes. Naruto, Ino said. Why weren't you allowed to tell us, or Temari-san? Naruto frowned and shot a glance at Asuma, who flicked his eyes around the room briefly before resuming his usual lazy look. Sorry, Ino-chan, I don't really know why it was added to my orders. He lied with a straight face. That was a really stupid question to ask while we are still in Suna, Ino-chan. Getting to his feet, Naruto stretched, ignoring the slight twinge from his ribs. Alright guys, it's been a really long day, and I need to go beat the hell out of a Kage. See ya in the morning. Ignoring the irritated look on Ino's face, Naruto quickly used a shunshin to escape any other questions. Ino stared at the handful of leaves drifting to the floor with irritation, then turned to glare at her team. That was rude. I had more questions. Shikamaru glanced up and met her gaze. That's probably why he ran off. You're very troublesome. You owe me big time for this, Naruto, he thought as Ino predictably flared up. He traded a wry glance with Choji as the blonde started lacing into them. Make that, he owes us. With night having fallen, Naruto knew there were only a handful of places he'd have to search for Gaara. Unable to sleep, his friend could almost always be found somewhere high watching the moon and the stars. In many ways, it was very similar to Naruto retreating to stone depiction of his father and watching out over the village. Finding his target, Naruto jumped over and sat down next to his friend with a deep sigh. The two boys sat watching the stars in comfortable silence for several minutes until Gaara spoke. I assume things went poorly if you are here, Naruto. Naruto winced in memory and threw Gaara a crooked smile. Just a bit. She broke my ribs 'cause she thought I killed you. Remind me to thank you for that one of these days. Gaara's lip twitched, then stilled. I am her brother, but you are her husband. It seemed fitting that you face her wrath rather than I. Naruto chuckled. Oh, you are such an ass sometimes, but never fear, oh brother-in-law of mine. I'm completely certain that she's going to take a strip out of your hide tomorrow. Gaara nodded. Not unexpected. Were you able to inform her of the mission payment? Naruto frowned heavily. No. He said with a large sigh. I walked in, she broke my ribs, and then stormed off when I told her it was the mission orders that kept me from telling her about it beforehand. I briefed Team 8 and then I came to find you. I figured I'd let her cool off some. That is unfortunate. Gaara replied evenly. Observing my siblings, I have noted that any time Kankuro left her alone after angering her, Temari only grew more angry. Naruto dragged his palm down his face. Well, that's wonderful. He said with irritation. So, by not following her after she punched me, I probably made her even more angry? That was what always seemed to happen with Kankuro. Gaara replied. Great, just freaking great. Not only do I have to deal with a pissed Temari-chan, Ino-chan is never going to let me live this down. Seeing the question in Gaara's eyes, Naruto explained. Ino-chan told me I needed to follow Temari-chan. Told me I would regret it if I didn't. I dearly hate it when Ino-chan is right and knows it. It's unpleasant. Gaara turned his face back towards the sky. Yes, I'm sure it is. Several minutes passed as Gaara listened with hidden amusement as Naruto ranted about stubborn, irritating blondes. The irony of that particular statement was undoubtedly lost on his friend for the moment, but Gaara felt he owed it to his Naruto to use it against him at some point in the future. After all, he mused, what sort of Kage would he be if he didn't use something like this against another Kage? That thought brought him back to the present. Was there a way to help his friend survive his sister, at least long enough to become Hokage? He was fairly sure, even with his limited ability to interact socially, that both Naruto and Temari would be less than amused if he threatened to crush them with his sand unless they stopped fighting. Still, he wasn't sure about the situation in general. If two people who care about you, that acknowledge you fight, who were you supposed to support? He was shaken from his thoughts when Naruto finished his rant and flopped onto his back to stare at the sky. I know you don't have the answers, he said softly, but what am I supposed to do? This doesn't seem like the sort of problem you can just beat into submission. I don't think I did anything wrong, so why is she so angry? Gaara shrugged uncomfortably and considered his words carefully. I suspect that you will simply have to follow your heart, Naruto. Emotions are difficult for me, but they seem necessary if my existence is not to ring hollow. I envy you for that. The night was quiet again as the two retreated into their own thoughts until several minutes later when Naruto popped to his feet and stretched. Bah, enough with the talking. That fight earlier got my blood pumping and I haven't had a sparring partner lately that I can go all out on. He smirked at Gaara. I'm pretty sure you can take anything I can dish out, right Gaara? Gaara's lips curved into his almost smile as he watched Naruto hop down off the roof and head out into the desert. Naruto's words were true, this was an opponent he wouldn't have to hold back much on, but certain ground rules would be needed. Perhaps, I won't crush you to death if you don't use explosive tags. Months afterward, that was the one part of the fight that really irked him. Explosive suppositories were simply unacceptable. The next several days passed quietly, while Naruto had yet to speak with Temari. He was visibly more relaxed, and the members of his escort squads felt it probably had something to do with the giant hole that used to be Sunagekyu's training ground 31. They weren't asking, and Naruto wasn't telling. Still, it seemed unlikely that the destruction of a training ground was not connected to Naruto and Gaara conveniently disappearing about the same time. The thought was reinforced as Gaara, clad in his formal Kazekage robes, escorted them from the village while bickering with Naruto. Or perhaps more accurately, silently listening to the blonde whine at him. "You are such a cheater," he complained darkly. "You weren't supposed to use all the remaining sand." Gaara's lips quirked and he raised an eyebrow at his friend. "We are shinobi, Naruto. For us, there is only the letter of the law," he said piously. "I refrained from crushing you to death, no mention was made of secondary sources of weapons." Naruto glared. "Was still cheating, though. I imagine you enjoyed the look on my face when you made that big sand spear." Gaara ignored the knowing smirk Naruto shot him at the end of his sentence and reflected on their spar. It had been truly exciting, being able to fight at almost full power and not worry about killing his opponent. Additionally, Naruto had helped him refine and improve his sand defenses. The fights in the Chunin exams and the failed invasion had made him aware of several weaknesses in his defense, namely high-speed attacks, piercing attacks, or in Naruto's case, massive blunt force trauma. Using Naruto's Rasengan, they discovered that placing a hardened layer of sand at an angle, cushioned by his normal sand shell, would deflect attacks much more efficiently. It was far from perfect, Naruto could still punch through, but it was a massive improvement, and several suggestions from Naruto had Gaara considering ways he could continue to improve. Reaching the edge of the village, the group paused and both boys shot glances at Temari. Her apparent calm composure didn't fool either of them. They could feel the rage rolling off her in almost visible waves. Motioning Naruto closer, Gaara leaned in so that his words wouldn't be overheard. "I have no advice for you, but I desire that you fix this problem with Temari." He paused and considered his words carefully. "She is important to me and her actions bring me pain. It is an uncomfortable feeling." Naruto nodded his understanding. He had a small advantage over Gaara in having never lost his ability to feel, but it wasn't helping him much. His wife's actions confused and hurt him, not emotions he was accustomed to either, or at least not like this. "Gaara, I'm not sure how to deal with this, but she is my wife and I will protect her as I would anyone precious to me." Gaara inclined his head, then stood back and spoke formally. "Shinobi of the Leaf, you depart as you arrived, friends and allies of the Sand Shinobi. We wish you safe travels, and may you always find water and shade." With a cheerful wave, Naruto turned and moved to walk next to Temari, the escort squads falling into formation with professional precision. A slight grin formed on Naruto's face, leaving Konoha had been far less formal, but under the eye of the Kazekage, some showmanship would show respect. His grin widened, they were shinobi, after all, appearances were part of the job. The trip home was intensely frustrating for Naruto and Temari. Every time he tried to speak with her, her cold gaze would cause him to freeze, and she would make her escape, unaware that she wanted him to follow her. Pride can lead to many unfortunate things, and neither was aware of how much the other missed their presence. Temari was hoping that perhaps they could speak when the group set up camp, but Naruto, not wishing to provoke his wife, simply set up his sleeping bag near the fire, unaware of Temari's eyes on him. Every night he struggled to sleep, unsure of his actions in a way he'd never been before, and every night, Temari would watch him from the tent, then curl up around his pillow and cry herself to sleep. She was aware, far more than her husband was, of the pride standing between them, but was unable to overcome it. Her life after her village sold her off was far from dreadful. Indeed, she was very happy with how events turned out, but her pride was possibly the only thing she truly had left from her life before Konoha. Perhaps things would be better once they got home, she'd have him to herself in their home. She wasn't worried that Naruto wouldn't accept her apology for attacking him. He'd forgiven Gaara of all people for trying to kill him, but she was still dreading admitting that she'd acted rashly and without thinking. She was supposed to be the calm, rational one, but events had proven that she currently was not. It was, to borrow from Shikamaru, troublesome. Arriving back at the village, Naruto was faced with a bit of a dilemma. He needed to report to Tsunade, but he didn't want Temari to go home and barricade herself, where he couldn't get to her after he was done. Figuring that he might as well do both, shadow clones being awesome like that, he created a clone and went to stand by Temari, who misinterpreted his actions and grew irritated. Believing Naruto had stuck her with a clone while he went to report in, Temari backhanded it in frustration and was shocked when her fist impacted on his nose with a sharp crack. Horrified that she'd hit him again, she immediately ran off, not seeing Naruto motioning for her to stop with the hand not covering his nose. Sighing heavily, Naruto turned back to the escort squads and motioned for Ino to fix his nose. Well, that didn't exactly go as planned, he said after she was done. Alright, I'm headed to report to Hokage-sama, Inu-san, you coming with? Getting what he interpreted as a somewhat sarcastic thumbs up from the masked Kakashi, he dismissed everyone else and jumped to the rooftops to travel to the Hokage Tower. So, how's the married life? Kakashi asked as the two leisurely crossed the village. Naruto rolled his eyes, an action not missed by Kakashi. Well, Inu-san, he drawled, heavily emphasizing Kakashi's ANBU codename. It's certainly different than your beloved books, maybe you should try it. Kakashi smirked under his layers of masks, and Naruto could almost see the dreaded eye smile in his response. Why? I'm having far too much fun watching you. Naruto grunted, aiming for the last word as they entered the tower. Sometimes you just suck, sensei. Not bothering to knock and idly wondering why he and Kakashi hadn't just come through the window, Naruto stood at attention and pulled out a large sealed envelope from his jacket. Mission accomplished, Hokage-sama. The Kazekage sends his regards and the new alliance contract. Handing her the envelope and officially completing his mission, he dropped back into a more casual stance. Tsunade pulled out several documents, quickly scanned them, and smiled. Looking up, she noted Naruto standing in a casual manner and decided that he'd at least completed the mission before he dropped the formalities. Any problems with the mission? She inquired. Naruto groaned. Not so much the mission, more the aftermath, Bachan. My wife reacted rather strongly. Tsunade raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Kakashi spoke up, laughter in his tone. Several broken ribs for Naruto, Asuma bounced off a ceiling and she's still not talking to any of us. Ah, I see. Naruto, dismissed. Inu, please remain. Waiting for Naruto to exit, Tsunade motioned for Kakashi to remove his mask. How bad is the damage to their relationship? Kakashi considered it. Probably not that bad, especially when Naruto gets a chance to explain the reason things happened the way they did. I give it maybe a few days, till things blow over. I've ordered my squad to stay quiet about Temari knocking Asuma for a loop, and I know he was more interested in the wind jutsu she used than angry about it. Potentially, Temari striking a ranking officer could be trouble, but her status as Naruto's wife and a Kazekage's sister makes for maybe internal political maneuvering at worst. Tsunade bit her thumbnail as she thought. I suppose I'm inclined to agree, but I try to never underestimate the amount of trouble that results when Naruto is involved in things. He's a good kid, but sometimes I could swear he inherited my grandfather's soul or something. Kakashi smiled at her. Your grandfather did great things. Tsunade rubbed the bridge of her nose. Yes, the Shodai Hokage was a great man, but he was still a pain in the ass. Without my great-uncle to keep him balanced, I'm not sure exactly where Konoha would be now. Moving her hand from her face, she drummed her fingers on the desk. Shikamaru is still being groomed as the logic to Naruto's passion. I wish we could just tell him, but you know how Anara would react to that. Kakashi smiled behind his mask. Yes, he knew exactly how Anara would react, and it amused him greatly. I suspect he probably knows. Shikamaru is very bright, but as long as it's not confirmed, he won't go looking for it. It would be far too troublesome after all. Tsunade chuckled and dismissed Kakashi, turning to face the Hokage monument. Minato, she mused aloud. I wish you were here to see your son, I'm sure you'd be proud of him. Turning back to her desk with a sigh, she eyed the paperwork balefully. Someday, I will destroy you, she hissed, before picking up a stack of mission requests. Naruto, you need to take this chair, sometime soon. After leaving the Hokage's office, Naruto wandered aimlessly for a bit, considering ways he could get Temari to talk to him. Drawing a blank, he headed to Ichiraku hoping that some of his favorite ramen would cheer him up. After the first bowl, he realized that it wasn't going to work and tipped Iam heavily to make up for not ordering like he usually would. Looking to clear his head, he traveled to the Hokage monument and sat in his usual place on his father's head. Letting the familiar sights soothe him, he wished he knew some way to clear things up with his wife. After being dismissed, Ino went home and cleaned up, finishing just in time to see Naruto wander by looking unhappy. Curiosity piqued, she stealthily followed him until he sat down at a taraku where she produced several shadow clones to continue her surveillance. Spotting Sakura wandering by, she dragged her friend into the bushes she was hiding in. "Gah, what the hell, Ino?" Sakura harshly whispered when Ino took her hand off her mouth and motioned for Sakura to be quiet. Watching Naruto through a pair of binoculars, Ino shushed her friend and whispered back. "We're doing some research tonight." Curious, Sakura followed Ino's gaze and saw Naruto sitting looking upset. "Ino, it's just Naruto, what do you mean research?" Ino turned to look at her, before going back to watching Naruto. He had a fight with Temari, which was surprisingly not his fault, and now he doesn't seem to know what to do. Sakura tried to avoid rolling her eyes. "This means what to us?" "Well, Naruto is the only guy near our age that's married, and I want to see how a man responds to things like this," Ino replied. Sakura stared at Ino flatly. "That is so stupid, I don't know where to start." Seeing Ino blushing slightly, her jaw dropped in shock. "Wait, you're interested in Naruto?" When Ino's blush deepened, Sakura tried several times to find the words before she managed to stammer out, "Since when? You never had any interest in him and now that he's married you're stalking him?" Ino sighed and stared at the ground, refusing to face her friend. "Since he faced down the Kyuubi for me." Several tears traced down her face and she finally met Sakura's eyes. "I was horrible to him, we all were, but I was really bad, and then, when the Kyuubi trapped me in his head. He stabbed himself through the stomach in his mind to free me, while telling the freaking Kyuubi that it couldn't have me because as a comrade I was precious to him. He showed no fear or hesitation when he did it, and then I was forced to relive his past. I couldn't have survived it, let alone come out of it and still be whole. I had to take a good hard look at everything, and I realized that Temari was probably the luckiest girl in the world when she got to marry him. He will do anything to protect those he cares about, and he'd do it with a smile on his face." Sakura closed the distance and pulled Ino into a hug. "I know," she said softly. "After what happened with Uchiha, Naruto saved me again. He's even offered to adopt me into the Uzumaki clan, and I think I'm going to accept his offer." She smiled shyly at Ino. "To get what you want, you know you'll have to go through Temari though. He might be able to have up to 2 more wives, but she doesn't really seem like the type to share. She does like you better than me, so you might have a shot. She flat out told Naruto that she would never accept me as a sister wife, but you might have a shot." Ino sniffed and wiped the back of her hand across her face to clear up the tears. "Maybe, I'm not sure that's what I want though. Besides, even if I did, they're just settling into their relationship, it wouldn't be a good time anyway." Looking up, Sakura spotted another form not dressed in purple. It was standing beneath a tree, attempting to hide. "Ino, there's someone else back here," she said with a small amount of alarm. Ino went back to watching Naruto through her binoculars. "Behind the oak, 25 meters to the south?" she asked without looking. "Yeah." "Oh, that's just Hinata. She claimed that spot before I started doing this." Sakura stared at her friend again. "How long, exactly, have you been doing this?" Ino shrugged sheepishly. "It's been a while." Sakura palmed her face as Ino's answer caused her to groan. Why were things never simple with Naruto? "So Ino, what happened with Temari?" Temari lay on her bed, arms wrapped around a pillow, hugging it to herself as she considered how much worse she might have just made things. She should have known that Naruto would have chosen to accompany her and sent the clone to the Hokage. She'd cried once she'd gotten home, but her tears were dry now as she waited for her husband to return home. "Tonight, I'll apologize tonight and accept whatever the consequences are," she told herself. It wasn't until she'd gotten home that she realized that Naruto wasn't avoiding her because he was angry, it was because he had no idea what he was supposed to do. He acted so different from her brother that she'd forgotten that they shared a similar problem. It was very stupid of her, and she mentally cursed. Where was her logic and reasoning when she really needed it? Rubbing her hand gently across her swollen stomach, she realized that was part of her problem, but not all of it. Sure, pregnancy hormones explained a lot, but thinking back, she realized that relying on that as the answer was weak. She paled somewhat as she realized that she'd been living so happily that she'd completely forgotten on some level that her and Naruto were not simply a regular couple. She'd fallen into the trap of being so comfortable that she'd been neglecting her emotional control. Throw in being pregnant, and her reaction to perfectly normal shinobi mission was more like that of a freaking civilian. She groaned in despair when she realized that this past week of hell had been almost entirely her fault. The door crashing open snapped her from her thoughts as she grabbed a kunai and spun around only to see an enraged Sakura standing there. "What the fuck is your problem?" the pink cat roared, startling Temari with both the volume and the language. Before could respond, Sakura began ranting at her. "You have probably the best guy in the village, he goes and does a mission almost entirely for you, saves your brother, and you refuse to even listen to him? Right now, Naruto is out in the village looking like something ate his soul, and you're sitting here hugging a damn pillow." Eyeing Temari with disdain, Sakura lowered her volume but heaped contempt into her tone. "You know, there are several girls in the village that want him, but I'm the only one of them that knows what a man wants. Heartbroken as he is and with our past, I could probably go get him right now. How would that make you feel, your husband riding the woman you hate?" Temari snapped and winged the kunai, grazing Sakura's ear and stopping her speech. "Mine," she roared back. "He's mine, and you will never have him," she hissed venomously. She was completely taken by surprise when Sakura's anger appeared to simply disappear. "Good," Sakura said quietly into the silence. "From what Ino told me, I was halfway afraid that you'd given up on him." She clenched a fist trying to bleed off some of the adrenaline and continued while Temari still seemed in shock. "If you'd given up on him, I would have carried through with that threat, but I'm happy enough with his offer of adoption into the clan. If I had to use my body to help him past a betrayal like that, I would do it, but that's not what I want." Temari tilted her head and spoke coldly. "I've realized what caused the problems and am simply waiting for my husband to come home. I did not need you to come break in the door and threaten me with seducing my husband." Sakura blushed but held her ground. "That isn't going to work, Temari. Right now Naruto is sitting on top of his father's head looking like his heart has been ripped out. In this case, you need to go to him." Temari carefully stood from the bed and made to leave. "I suppose there is some sense in your words," she admitted grudgingly. "You do realize that I will never allow you to have him, yes?" Sakura narrowed her eyes. "I am aware." "Good." Underneath Konoha, Danzo listened to his agent report the events of the mission to Sunagakure. "Good, you will return and continue your normal activities, Akimichi." Watching his agent leave, he idly wiped the trickle of blood seeping under his bandages away. Truly he would have preferred either the Nara or Yamanaka heirs as agents, but both were too risky. Tsunade acting to remove the requirements for a Uzumaki/Namikaze heir to marry into Sunagakure was an excellent move. He had no complaints even if she'd once again allowed the weapon to travel to another village. The friendship formed between the weapons was problematic but seemed to be beneficial to Konoha, so he was willing to allow it to continue under supervision. The sand girl striking her husband was something he had no real use for at the moment, but waste not, want not. Striking a ranking jonin, that had possibilities. Still, it was better to sit on that knowledge, using it now would reveal that he'd hidden an agent on the mission. No better to gain some distance, perhaps start some rumors in the village regarding it. Yes, things were proceeding satisfactory for the moment, but it never hurt to be prepared. Roots have spread to ensure the safety of the tree, after all. In the nearly abandoned Uchiha district, Sasuke sat in meditation, controlling the flow of chakra through his body with far more precision than he'd ever managed before. Opening his eyes, he stared at his mangled left arm with satisfaction as he managed to slightly move every finger. His eyes seemed to glow in the dark as he allowed himself a dark smirk. The world thought him crippled, and for now he was, but tonight he knew that wouldn't always be the case. Sooner than they'd expect, the world would face the Uchiha again. Temari quietly approached Naruto, only to see him jerk and reach for weapons. Seeing it was only Temari, he shot her a glance she had trouble interpreting before he settled back down and patted the stone beside him. Accepting his invitation, she sat down and carefully pulled her knees towards her chest to lay her arms across them. Several minutes passed before Temari shivered from the light bite in the wind. Shifting slightly, Naruto slid his jacket off and placed it around his wife's shoulders. Murmuring a thanks, Temari pulled the jacket tighter and breathed in a scent she hadn't realized she missed so much. It seemed almost silly to her, but that was the moment that she realized that she actually loved her husband. Stubborn and infuriating, but also sweet and kind, he was far, far more than he appeared, and she was his. The realization broke the ice she was feeling, and gazing at him, she felt a warmth she'd never really paid attention to before. "I'm sorry, Naruto," she said almost inaudibly. "I'm not going to try to excuse what I did, but I know I was wrong, and I am truly sorry." Naruto turned to face her, looking puzzled as he read her body language. He seemed to stare through her soul when he made eye contact. Suddenly a huge grin crossed his face, and he scooted over to wrap an arm around her waist. "I'm sure I don't want to know what happened," he admitted, "but I know you meant that apology, so it's best left in the past." Temari resisted the urge to facepalm. This was what she'd been afraid of for a week. He'd seen a true apology, and simply accepted it. Then again, she mused. Before tonight, I'm not sure how sincere the apology would have been. Perhaps in the long run, the past week had been necessary? "So, Naruto, what really happened in Suna?" Listening to her husband explain, Temari was struck by both how simple, yet complex the mission had been. "So my brother needed to say something to get you legitimately angry?" "What did he say?" Naruto mumbled something under his breath, but decided to answer when she glared at him. "He said that I wasn't good enough for you, and that he should take you back," he admitted with a heavy sigh. Temari couldn't help but giggle a bit at Naruto's expression. Even knowing that Gaara didn't mean it, it had been enough to cause him to publicly rage. Still, it brought another question to Temari's mind. Why didn't Gaara want anyone else involved, or even told? "The ANBU squad I reluctantly agreed to have join us had orders that if the mission failed, they were to get you to safety no matter the cost. Gaara also issued similar orders to Kankuro. Neither of us wanted our family involved in a fight that could possibly turn against us, like this could." Naruto paused and considered if he wanted to divulge the rest, and decided he might as well. "Gaara doesn't believe he will ever have children himself. I've told him that he shouldn't assume that, but, well, you know how he is." Amusingly enough, Gaara also believes Kankuro is far too fond of his puppets to ever have children as well. Temari giggled at the thought and silently agreed with her little brother. Kankuro really was rather fond of his puppets. Waiting for Temari to stop giggling with a grin, Naruto continued his explanation once she regained control. "So, Gaara considers you to be the only one capable of continuing your family line. To be completely honest, right now, both of us are far more expendable than you." Temari grimaced at the explanation. It was cold and logical, and she really couldn't fault it, but she hated it. "You know I don't find either of you to be expendable, don't you?" "Yeah, we know." They sat holding each other in silence for several more minutes before Naruto stood and dragged Temari to her feet. "I have several things I still need to do before I head home. Why don't you go home and take a warm bath?" He winked at her. "If you're a really good girl, I'll even massage some of those back pains away." Pulling him into a hug, Temari leaned down a bit and kissed him. "Don't make me wait too long." Releasing him, she carefully began making her way back into the village. Blowing out a breath he wasn't aware he'd been holding, Naruto Chakra walked down the side of the monument into the village, then randomly traveled for a good 30 minutes before heading home. Instead of going inside, he circled the house and entered the main garden before stopping and listening. "I know you're there, you can come out now," he called into the darkness. A figure in a black robe with red spots strode out. "Very impressive, Naruto-kun," the man said softly. "You've certainly improved since we last met." Naruto froze in panic as two red eyes seemed to glow in the darkness ahead of him. "Itachi." This was all for now. Thank you for watching, I hope you liked it and that you will be back for more. Please like, share and subscribe. See ya.